Well, good morning. Thank you again for joining Microdosing Group today. I'm really excited to come together here at the beginning of 2026 and take some time to focus on what a lot of people choose to focus on in the beginning of our fiscal year, and that is how are things this year going to look different from things last year? And the only way to really do that is to think about what we really want. And we've talked about the idea of wanting in some of our prior microdosing groups, but I wanted to dig into that a little bit more today and also talk about some of the neuroscience that's behind the idea or the concept of wanting. So here's a few questions for reflection as we're kind of getting started. Do you know what you want? Not what you've been conditioned to want, not what looks successful, not what keeps other people comfortable or what other people have told you should want. But do you know what you want for yourself? Second to that, then, is are you getting what you want? If the answer is no, then we typically think we need to work harder, move faster, get up earlier, stay up later, put in more hours, somehow cram more human action into the 24 hours that we have in a daily light cycle of sun up to sundown. Well, and back to sun up if we're talking 24 hours. But with all that effort, the bigger question really that supersedes all of those is why do you want what you currently want? Is it coming from genuine desire or is it coming from a place of conditioning? And again, back to those ideas of what other people may have told you it should look like. Is it from your own internal signal? Or is it from comparison, expectation, and survival strategy? Because as human beings, we are wired for survival. At that real basic foundational place, that's how we as a species are wired, is to survive. But this survival is what we call it and what we know at this moment in time looks very different than it used to. And that's where a lot of those ideas of I just need to work harder, push harder, get up earlier, cram more doing into my days, and then I'll get what I want. But from a neuroscience perspective, this is really important to consider why these ideas are here because most of our wants are not chosen consciously. They're inherited through belief systems and ideas that have been handed to us through our environment, starting as a child and through whatever political, religious, or cultural belief systems were given to us at that point in time. And then, of course, through our adult experiences. So then these wants or these ideas of what we want becomes tied to our identity, our safety, our self-worth. And when we think we're not getting it, the brain interprets that as a threat to our survival. So that threat response, of course, activates our amygdala, that little area in the back of the brain, fight or flight, fear, emotional responses. And then the prefrontal cortex starts losing its influence because no longer are we thinking clearly. We start getting what we often refer to as brain fog or chaos in the mind. And then we immediately go to our default way of thinking. When executive functioning becomes cloudy and messy, then default mode network jumps in, takes over, and that's again where all those inherited ideas and belief systems come from. So if I push you even a little bit further and ask the question, what if you don't get what you want? How does your body physically respond to that idea? Does your chest start to tighten up? Blood pressure might go up a little bit. The brain starts being a little chaotic. What do you mean? That's not possible. Is it possible? I don't know. But your reaction is not ambition. And that's what often happens when we think about this concept of wanting. It's, okay, this urgency that I'm feeling is what is going to drive me or motivate me to actually go achieve or get these things that I think I want. but it's not ambition, it's a fear response. And when we label it as a fear response, we're able to dissect it and unpack it a little bit differently because as soon as you recognize it's a fear response, then we go to what is the fear? What is underneath those ideas? What is underneath that concept of not actually achieving what you think you should achieve, getting what you think you should get, satisfying that want that you have? Again, back to those ideas of identity. So when we can actually recognize and accept that we might not get what we want, and that can still be okay. Now you can think and pursue and move from a place of clarity. All those stress hormones calm down, the amygdala quiets down, prefrontal cortex comes back online, starts functioning clearly again. That fear-based thought process that's the default mode network, ruminating and getting stuck in those thought loops, quiets down. That cognitive flexibility starts to increase. When panic dissolves, then clarity returns. When clarity returns, our decision quality improves, the ability to make those healthy choices for ourselves. And when that decision quality improves, the probability of getting what you want actually increases. So the acceptance that you might not get everything you've been told that you think you should or shouldn't have allows you to move in a more clear way towards the things that you do want. Because no longer is it coming from a place of survival or fear or fight or flight or panic. It's from clarity, decision making, and authentic ownership or authorship of those decisions that you want for yourself. So what I wrote down was you can't skill your way out of a threat response. You can only think your way out of it. So we live in a world that is constantly throwing ideas at us of who we should be, how we should be, what we should want, what we should have, how we should obtain those things. And those are the things that really contribute to this chaotic mindset. Microdosing and introducing psilocybin in these small doses is what helps the brain be able to slow down and rewire out of those old ways of thinking. So back to that geeky neuroscience part, psilocybin reduces blood flow to the amygdala, quiets down that fight or flight and fear response. It stimulates the prefrontal cortex, executive functioning, clarity, thinking about the future, setting goals, making healthy, rational choices. And it quiets that default mode network, which is those inherited rigid belief systems that we have, the filters of how we perceive the world, and even more importantly, how we perceive ourselves. So many of these goals or ideas or wants that we set up for ourselves because they've been handed to us, we predetermine we're never going to reach because we're not capable, we're not smart enough, we don't have enough financial resources, probably not going to work out, other things haven't worked out, I don't have the right life partner, I don't have any life partner. I'm supposed to have all these things or have my life look a certain way so then I can go and achieve. And when we can take all that messaging and realize that that's a bunch of old information that's been handed to us and really author our own wants in our own lives, then we can approach it in a different way and from a place of clarity for ourselves. So I'm going to pause at that moment and give you guys a chance to kind of share what's coming to mind for you. What are some of the things that maybe are resonating or other questions or ideas coming up?
This is a good one today, Charity. I appreciate your slower tone today, and I was able to absorb a lot of the things you were saying. Going back to your first statement, do you know what you want? Some of us out here might answer no to that, in which case that could be a whole different session. But I guess the idea that it's okay not to not to achieve what you want, and in part maybe because those are inherited wants and so forth. And the idea that that in turn reduces or increases the clarity and reduces the stress, I think is very meaningful.
Mhm. When we really look at those, Scott, of the where they came from and why we have them, that's where I think that space happens to be able to determine, is this something I even should be wanting for me?
Right.
So, Jen, you unmuted. Go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I'm in the car, so um, yeah, my daughter and I did the 13 Nights of Wishes, this year, and we had to sit down and intentionally write down the things that we do want for ourselves in the new year. So we did 12 little slips of paper, and we folded them, put them into a box, and surprisingly, the one that came up, you have to burn every night. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not, but you have to burn every night of the 12 nights from the 22nd, the solstice, through the first of the year. You burn one of those slips of paper. And then the one that you're left with on the first of the year, the second, is the one that is your intent, for that year. And it turned out that the answer was joy. So I think it was really good, well timed, and very, because I mean, I can't even remember half of the stuff I put down, but I just had to get it out of my head. So I thought that was really cool that both of us ended up with joy and putting our artwork first in the new
Mhm.
year. And because too many choices sometimes, too many freaking choices. And then I can't, I just get overwhelmed. And so that was easy for me. I appreciate you bringing this topic up today. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Jen. That idea of joy too is more of a mindset. It's not a tangible thing that we're seeking to acquire. It's not something that can really be sought after. It's something that's experienced, and it's the way that we approach things. And as we talk about in these groups, often that aspect of how we think about things is what has the biggest impact on how we experience something in the moment. So that concept of letting joy be a focus can be something that helps bring more what I'm going to call positive reflection or positive or healthy intent to experiences as you go through them this year.
Jen, were you blindly burning those, or did you selectively each day? Joy was always one of the ones that you let go till
No,
the next day.
no, no, 12, 13 different wishes. It's like birthday wish. You just in an instant, you make a wish. There's no, you just kind of like no pressure. So it
Yeah,
was like I wrote down 13 wishes, and then I burned one of those each night.
but you
And
chose the one to burn.
I did not, I just kind of shook up the box, you know what I mean? And
Oh,
whatever
it was
came out,
blind then. Okay.
yeah, it was
Huh.
a blind, random.
Interesting.
Yeah, wasn't familiar with that. That's an interesting concept, though. To sit down and write down the the wishes or the ideas or the goals that might be coming up can be a really interesting experience. Just
Yeah, and I can tell you one of those is not work. More work. No.
nobody said I want more work. I really hope for that this year. Well, and that goes back to the idea of when we can think about what we want for our life, and some of the wants can be tangible. I mean, the reality is that we live on a planet and in a moment in time where tangible things are part of how we survive now. Having a home or whatever that looks like, having a place to live, having warmth in the cold months and cool in the hot months, transportation, whatever that might look like for different individuals, clothing, food that sustains the body, the ability to have quiet in the mind. What I'm going to call mental health, although I think that's another whole topic in and of itself of how we define mental health and mental illness and the differences between those two. But mental health being I can make decisions from a clear place. I'm not coming from a place of fear and chaos all the time and thinking about relationships or work or goals or whatever those different thoughts might be, like the self, even. But being able to have a reduction in fear as we move forward in our lives is what allows for that clarity as we make various decisions towards what we want. And those can change. What we wanted when we were 12 isn't going to be the same as what we want when we're 42. A lot of life experience and time passes in there. But if we also think about that 30-year span between 12 and 42, so much of that is encompassed in how the shift happens and how we view ourselves and other people responding to us. So often, these ideas of what we think we are allowed to want or what we give ourselves permission to move forward towards is based on how we perceive other people responding to us. And those perceptions are so interesting if we really dig down into that, because all of those perceptions still come through our own filter. We cannot perceive that someone is responding to us in a really open and accepting way if we ourselves do not respond to people in an open and accepting way. If we are always a little, sketched out about how other people are acting, then when somebody responds to us, we're going to wonder, what is that sketchy thinking behind the way that they are responding to us? And then we're going to therefore then respond to that instead of to what maybe their actual authentic intent was. So this idea of really defining the belief systems and the influences that have been handed to us that supersede any ideas that we have, definitions of words even, then allows us to sit in a different place with ourself. How am I going to define my life? How am I going to define what I want my experience on this planet to look like? It can be having more time in nature. It can be moving towards a more comfortable life, and however we define that. It can be focused on specific relationships. But there is an experience that each of us has on this planet. And if we only take what society and old information hands to us to go through those experiences, we miss so much. It's like not having access to the internet and only having the big encyclopedia set that fits on the bookshelf. I think most of us on group today are old enough to remember those.
Oh my God, yes, the boat anchors.
Yes. And and I remember as a child having, a paper to write or a project for school and pulling those off the shelf and reading through and looking at the pictures. And I never questioned at that moment in time that that information might be limited to what could fit on the page in there. It was like, well, here's everything I need to know about this because that's what I had. And now we get a concept, and what's the first thing we do? Well, 5 years ago it was I'm going to Google it. Now it's I'm going to chat GPT it. So, which is kind of interesting that those become their own actual verbs, right? To Google something or to chat GPT something.
Yeah,
But
until you take a closer look and you see the slop that's, that's mixed in. Oh, oh my God.
so much information. Yeah. So more information, to your point, Jen, isn't necessarily helpful. It's just more information. And all of that information comes from other people's ideas. So now we have ideas on ideas on ideas on ideas, and we're sitting in our little bubble of our life thinking, how do I sift through all of these ideas to figure out what I'm supposed to get out of this life experience? What is the biggest thing that we most commonly hear when someone is in a state of what I'm going to call some mental distress? But the question always comes back to, what is my purpose? Like somehow we are supposed to take this entire existence of our lifespan on this planet and narrow it down to one single purpose. And it's
That's a
not,
lot of pressure.
yeah,
Yeah, that's too much pressure.
because it's putting into a box your entire lifespan of experiences, how you interact with others, what you move toward, what you participate in, what activities you have, what family roles you share in, what community roles you share in. How can we say, well, this is my purpose and this is what I'm going towards? And instead, if we look at what is the experience that we have in the grandeur of it all during our lifespan, we get to take different things away from it. And we're not limited to a singular definition of the self.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Because there is nothing singular about any human on this planet. So a cognitive challenge can be, what if my purpose is achieved just by the fact that I'm here? You're here. Good job. Purpose achieved. You have made it to the planet and you have lived to this point in time. Beyond that, what do we choose to do with this experience? If the singular purpose of nature, which is we are all natural beings and we also are all fallible, so at some point we will die, whether we all like to accept that or not, it is a fact. The body will die. The body will go back to its physical state. All the things that we're made up of are all found in nature. And nature continues to go forward because it is a cycle. And there will be a new group of people that come on the planet after us. And that's not depressing. That's just nature, and that's just the cycle. But with this intelligence that we have as humans, and with these other aspects that we have of ourselves as humans, what do we choose to do with those during the time that we're here? How do we serve the other humans? How do we connect with nature? How do we have that larger aspect? It's not based in a fear of dying or only living in fight or flight or survival mode.
Yeah, something that my daughter and I were talking about is, and you're probably familiar with this concept, but where you have the manager who's running things in your body, all the different personalities, and you have the manager, and then you have the what's it called, the fireman, the fire person, who's going to put out all the dang fires, and then you got the child somewhere lost in there somewhere who's exiled, you know and then there's the true self. I don't know, is that familiar to anybody? Because that's what I was she threw that down. I was like, oh my God, the manager's been running things all my life, because of survival and that just that and she kept saying, "Can I please speak to the child? The child? I don't want to talk to the manager." It's like I am not a Karen. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to the authentic person. Is she in there somewhere? I'm like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah. So
where
it
do
was
you
all
think
that
that authentic person or that child goes, Jen?
freaking runs off in hiding. She's left. She's left the building. Yeah. Just because the manager is always managing everything. She does her thinking for her. She does, just trying to regulate everything, but not doing a very good job of it. So yeah, interesting, interesting.
And so if we extend that idea a little bit, the manager theoretically we would think would be that prefrontal cortex, executive functioning. But in exactly what you're describing, the manager is impaired by fear, by trying to juggle all the balls, by trying to meet everybody's expectations. So you take that cognitive experience as a whole, and we've got the amygdala with fight or flight and fear, the default mode network with all our old ways of thinking and our ideas and beliefs that have been handed to us. And then we're trying to get that executive functioning prefrontal cortex to somehow have all those things, heightened and make rational decisions and help us choose healthy things that we're moving towards. And it doesn't work because everything's clouded. And that's exactly what psilocybin does with this microdosing is it allows us to go back to that natural self. I'm going to use the phrase because you brought it up, that childlike state. But, a child is 100% natural. They're not tainted by belief systems and ideas and definitions, and they're not limited. When you ask a 5-year-old what they want to be when they grow up, they always have an answer. And it's not limited to any idea that has been given to them that they might not be able to achieve that. Adults limit themselves because that's what we're taught. We're taught that we have limitations. We're taught that we shouldn't achieve certain things. We're taught that because we are a certain race or gender or educational class or financial class or whatever it might be that we have taken on as a limitation to ourselves, that somehow that's less than. And then the individuals that continue to push past that and say, oh no, I'm not going to let that hinder me. Oftentimes, what we look at as, wow, they're so ambitious, they're so confident. What is that? That's fear on hyperdrive. Because the idea of failing or not getting what they want is what causes that incessant push towards it. The problem with moving in that direction is if that is what's pushing the individual, fear, panic, the idea of failure or not getting what they want, and it comes from those deeper fear places, then even if they get it, it's not going to be enough. Because now, where else does the rest of that go? Now it goes to a fear of losing it. If my only goal in life is to have $100 million, then if I get $100 million, what am I going to do? Well, that was my one goal. So now I just want to make sure I have to protect that. And now my fear, my fight or flight, and my push and my ambition is how do I make sure I keep that instead of living in a place of enjoyment? Whereas if instead a goal is to have $100 million, but also I'm okay if I don't get that, how much more freedom is there then in potentially attaining the $100 million? Being like, wow, look, it did work out. I can be generous with it. I can enjoy it. I can use it in ways that are healthy and helpful, rather than that being the one singular identifying thing that I've been pushing for my entire life. When we relinquish control, for those of you that have used the microdosing guidebook that Grow Your Own Thoughts puts out, that concept of relinquishing control is what gives us the freedom to enjoy the things that we have and to choose our wants and our goals in a way that's healthy and clear. Because guess what? 90% of what we think we control, we don't anyway. Turn on any news station on any given morning and you realize just how many things are outside of your control. And then go down to your kitchen in the morning, and if you cohabitate with any other humans, you'll also realize how many things are outside of your control because we don't get to control the other humans. What else comes to mind?
Could you talk more about fears and sort of the ones that are controllable and the ones that are involuntary and uncontrollable?
Yeah, when we look at fear, the first question to ask ourselves is this idea an actual threat to my survival? Is it a threat to the physical aspect of the self? So many of our fears are in ideas of how things should look. I should show up this way. My family should appear this way. My job should look this way. And all those shoulds and ought tos are where a lot of those fears are tied. Now, we can certainly have fears on behalf of the actual physical survival of other people that we care about. But that's where that idea of control comes in. Do we get to actually control that? And if we just live in fear of how our life outcome is going to be or how someone else's life outcome is going to be, then we're missing what parts we actually get to control about that. When we can relinquish that fear, things will be what they will be. When we see an opportunity to move in a healthy way, we can move in a healthy way. But when that concept is connected to another human, we have to allow them to have their personal authorship over their lives as well. They will make those choices. The question there then can be, if somebody that I care about makes choices that I don't think are healthy or that lead their lives in a way that seems self-destructive for them, what does that mean about me? Because that's what we have to go back to with a lot of those fears. There's always a reflection back to the idea of the self. What does it mean about me that society thinks this or that about my job, my family member, my family structure, how I live? That identity piece is what we call it, or the ego, the idea of the self, gets more focused than anything else because that's where that idea of survival is rooted. But that's why if we can let go of the fear that drives so much of our survival based on the ideas that have been given to us, that can subside. Does it mean that other people then start doing what we want? Not necessarily. But it sure frees them up to choose that for themselves if they want to. Does it mean then that we get the job we think we want or the lifestyle we think we want? Maybe, maybe not. But if we take away the fact that any of that is tied to the value, the intrinsic value of ourself as an individual, then those things become a lot less emotionally connected. Identity, or how we view ourselves, is a huge part of what drives these inner fears that become very external and show up in a lot of areas. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is when we are thinking about what we want, a question is this coming from our own genuine, personal, authentic desire, or is it coming from conditioning? Because we've been told or taught that something should look or appear a certain way. Is this a threat to my physical survival? Or is it a threat to an idea that I'm holding on to? Something we've used in the past in our discussions is there actually a bear in the room? Or is there a hologram of a bear? A tangible threat versus the idea threat. When we accept something and choose to be in a state of relinquishing control and allowing for acceptance, it doesn't reduce our ambition or our movement towards what we want, but it reduces the threat to the idea of not getting it or not having it or not showing it. When we're not moving from a state of fear, the brain is more flexible. We allow for different perspectives. We allow for the idea that people can live in ways that are different than how we want to live, and that's fine. What's right for them doesn't have to be right for us, and what's right for us doesn't have to be right for them. Because the outcome of what is right for them is a completely different goal than what we want when we allow for that separation. If someone has a specific, we use politics or religion, political or religious belief system that I don't agree with because it's not the way I want to live my life. It's not what I see or doesn't align with the goals that I have. Then it doesn't make them wrong. It just means we don't have the same goals. So they can choose their goals and have their belief system that goes that direction. And I can choose my goals and have my belief system that goes a different direction. And we're both right for what we individually want. That concept is one of the hardest to hold on to as, I think, within a family structure, as a parent, as a spouse, as a sibling. That's that tightest human connection that we have. But that moves into business as well. For CEOs, executives, management, other employees. The goal has to be aligned if people are going to work together. So when we look at something as big as, let's say, the United States as a country, whatever country, but since we're in the United States, the idea of the United States as a entity, as a national entity, has very big goals that we all have different opinions on. But there are certain core things that most people within the United States will say, yes, we agree on these core things. And I'm not going to mention them because it just will take the conversation in political direction. That's not the goal. But when we dial each of those back, then the states have their ways of running things, right? And within the United States, if you don't like what one state does, you can move to a different state, or you can travel across state lines. If we dial that back, then even cities and municipalities have their goals. And then corporations within those municipalities have their goals, and families and individuals, and we just move down from the big picture. But as an individual, learning to really kind of fine tune some of the things that you want for your life allows there to be a compass that gets measured against. If we have no wants and we just float around and say, well, I want this because I was told it's what I'm supposed to do. I want to go to college because I'm told I'm supposed to go to college and somehow that will help me make more money or get me a good job. And then you go to college and you're like, where's the money? Where's the good job? Oh, well, there's no guarantee of that. So I've done these things. I went through the steps of what I was told was the right things to do, and I'm still not getting what I want. It's time to question the want. Who gave that to you? Where did that come from? Is it what you want? One thing that we can, I think, collectively agree on, though, is that if we're living from a mindset of fear, we're not living in clarity. Healthy decisions don't come from a place that is rooted in fear. They come from a place that is rooted in clarity. When we can recognize the fear and use it as a tool, like the body's stress response. So often as a clinician, I hear, oh, I just want to be less stressed. I want to be less anxious. Well, what is that? Why is the body feeling that? It's coming from thoughts and ideas that are contributing to that stress and that anxiety. That is the body saying, hey, human, there's something going on here that's not working. We need to shift it. So how do we quiet the mind to get to a place of being able to shift what's rooted in that stress and anxiety? We have to quiet the default mode network. We've got to reduce the fear, drop blood flow to the amygdala, and then enhance clarity, stimulate that prefrontal cortex. And I'm being very broad in what psilocybin really does by focusing on those three things. There's a lot of other things that it does and a lot of other benefits to microdosing psilocybin, but focusing on these three today because these are the three core areas that contribute to how we think, which contributes to our fears and our wants, and then therefore how we choose to live.
And what are those three things?
The reduction of blood flow to the amygdala, so not being in fear and fight or flight, quieting of the default mode network, getting out of that rigid way of thinking, having more openness to different perspectives and cognitive flexibility, and stimulating the prefrontal cortex, that executive functioning of clear thinking, planning, forethought, setting goals, measuring responses. So when we are able to accept where we are and clearly decide where we want to go, then the brain will stop interpreting all these things that exist around us and that we determine as happening to us as threats. What was a threat can become an opportunity. What was something that was very fearful just becomes much more objective. So again, that idea, you cannot skill or ambition your way out of a threat response. You can only think your way out of it. And I don't mean ruminating thought about thought, about thought, about thought, about thought. I mean quieting the mind, reducing the fear to be able to think differently, clearly, conceptually. So as we move towards closing out our group discussion today, is there any other thoughts that come to mind or any other questions or anything just personally that anybody wants to share?
I would like to share that, I've been on this journey for about a year now, Charity, and I don't want to say mindlessly, but pretty much just, microdosing and not, and just experiencing benefits in the background without consciously thinking about, and I think, today I've learned that I need to consciously think about what's going on and how I can take control of that, of my thought processes. So if there's anybody else out there that's just, it's not enough just to microdose. I think you have to put in to the game. Is that your belief as well?
Absolutely, 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, microdosing is the tool that allows for that flexibility of how we experience life. But if we don't ever stop to think about why we're experiencing it the way we are, nothing really changes.
Yeah, that's the truth. Um, Sort of a mindfulness thing, all these exercises really do. I mean, it's just a tool, but my microdosing is just a tool in my toolbox that I use along with the other things that I'm doing, like journaling and music therapy and and therapy, talk therapy, etc. Group therapy. I got all those things going on. But yeah, this is a journey that microdosing helps me to stay more in the present tense and stay in my lane and be, sort of be, like you said earlier, like just be your authentic, being your authentic self and letting that come out. And I think the child that's been in exile will, emerge finally. But yeah, it's a challenge to quiet all of those intrusive thoughts that come from all the voices that I heard all my life, all the people pleasing stuff and all that garbage that I just want to let go for 2025 and, be more present minded 2026. Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, Jen, we have a lifetime of voices to let go of, a lifetime of ideas.
That's right. Ida. Yep. Always, it's like the snake, always shedding its skin, always shedding its skin.
Yep. But having that intentional awareness around it, and that's why I chose the topic for today of really defining what you want and understanding, choosing between what's been handed to us and what we choose for ourselves. Because when we have when we have an inner compass of something, then we have a reference point. All other decisions get measured against that. Does this align with where I'm going? If I'm going from Colorado Springs to Denver, that's a pretty straight line north on I-25. But if I decide, that halfway up, I want to jump off over on and head over on Highway 83 and then, hit 70, well, now I'm going to end up somewhere over in Kansas if I go east. That so if I'm not paying attention to my roadmap and I'm not paying attention to what I want for my life and I'm just kind of floating around, I'm going to end up somewhere I don't want to be. Nothing against Kansas for those of you in Kansas. Just wasn't the goal if I was going to Denver. So, and again, maybe we end up in Kansas and we're like, you know what? Look at this amazing opportunity. But that's the cognitive openness. The openness is that there can be other places to go, other things to move toward, other things to allow into our life and into our perspective if we don't sit in a state of rigid thought about how everything is supposed to look because that's what's been told to us. This is not about buck the political system. It's not about try and create revolts. It's not about go and start a big movement. Maybe that's things that come out of various ideas. And many of those are rooted in a concept of choosing different and not just sticking with status quo and what's been handed to us for time over time over time. But all of those things start first with ourself. Just me, just each of you, just each of the listeners. You as an individual, what do you want for your life? And give yourself permission to not have limitations that are self-imposed or society imposed or anybody else imposed. Move towards what you want with the understanding and acceptance that if you don't get it, that's also okay. But at least you have a direction that you're going. And that direction is what will allow for other opportunities to show up. So yes, Scott, mindlessly microdosing misses the mark. It's just a piece of it.
Okay, well, I'm glad you said it's a piece because I do believe in the physical benefits that
Absolutely.
have occurred during this last year. I know they're there.
Yes. And it's those things, to your point, that allow for the bigger concepts to have a possibility of shifting. If we never quiet things down, if we never have more focus, if we never enhance awareness, if we stay in a state of chaotic mindfulness or chaotic mindset, then there's no opportunity. None of this even matters because we're too tightly wound. There's no access for any of this. But when we relax that rigid thinking, move away from a state of fear, allow for more openness and different perspective, that changes everything. Now the world is your oyster. Possibilities are endless. What do you want to choose? So for those of you on live group today, thank you so much for your contribution, for sharing your thoughts and things that have been meaningful to you. For those of you listening online, glad that you could listen into today's conversation. Please jump on to growyourownthoughts.org, join in our groups live if you want to. We'd love to hear how microdosing is helpful for you.